After being chased through the level 1 corridors by an enraged skin stealer, my team and I were cornered at the end of a hallway and forced to go through a mysterious door. Though the sign above us read exit, we knew that here in the back rooms, nothing was as it seemed. There was a chance that whatever existed beyond this supposed exit was just as bad, if not worse, than what we'd already barely survived. But we had no choice. My already small team was dwindling. Janice had been taken by a terrifying entity on level 0, David had been consumed and replaced by the skin stealer, and Andrew had been killed in the chase. Now it was just me, Ben, and Diane, and we were willing to do whatever it took to survive. Little did we know that this level would be a gauntlet of horrors unlike anything we'd experienced so far. This level, as I would later learn, doesn't even have a name. Travelers refer to it as one of the oddball levels, and it's referred to just by a single exclamation mark. This is not a place where you can stop. All you can do here is run for your life, and believe me when I tell you that that's exactly what we did. The level resembled the hallway of a hospital, with sterile white walls and linoleum flooring. The red light we saw from the other side of the door was everywhere in here. Instead of the regular ceiling lights we'd gotten used to on the other 2 levels, the only sources of light in here were dozens of glowing exit signs placed nonsensically at intervals along the entire length of the hallway. The hallway itself seemed to stretch on forever, with no visible end from where we were standing. Even though most of the doors were marked with exit signs, they were all locked. Instinctively, we knew that the only way out would be at the end, however long that took us to get to. But those doors didn't stay locked for long. As soon as the door back to level 1 had closed, an alarm sounded. It sounded almost like an air raid siren, giving me flashbacks of playing Silent Hill on the PS1 in my college days. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It seemed to radiate from everywhere and nowhere at once. That's when we started to hear another sound, the clicking and creaking of door handles opening. We didn't stick around to see what or who was coming out of the door. We needed to run. Level exclamation mark, which I was referring to as the red level while I was actually in it, is absolutely infested with creatures, all of which hide in the dark catacombs beyond the many doors along the length of the hallway. Some, like the facelings, will leave you alone, but most of them will be aggressive at best and deadly at worst. Whether this level is controlled by some unseen intelligent force or if it's just automated by some method beyond our understanding, the entities seem to be activated whenever a traveler enters the red level, like a drop of blood in the middle of a colony of sharks. Among the creatures we were being chased by were skin stealers like the one we'd only just escaped on the last level, and clumps, living masses of arms that skittered around corners and up walls, occasionally blocking our paths as we ran. Despite not being all that dangerous, they were incredibly revolting, stinking of sweat and not dissimilar to intense human body odor. It was absolutely nauseating to experience. But perhaps the worst of the creatures we encountered in the red level were the Hounds. The Hounds look humanoid at a distance, but only in the loosest sense. They have bodies mostly shaped like our own, but altered to better fit an entirely quadrupedal posture. Think of it as though you told some Frankenstein-esque mad doctor to build a dog, but only given human parts to do it, and a vague description of a dog as your reference point. As the name Hounds suggests, these creatures walk on all fours as easily as a dog would. They wear no clothes, but their heads are always covered in thick, black hair, which hangs down to obscure their faces. Underneath that hair is a malformed skeletal face with a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. The bone is exposed mainly due to the creature's insatiable appetite, driving it to tear off and consume their own skin. Hounds will eat anything, living or dead, organic or inorganic, and have a bite strong enough to break bone. We had to run from several of them in our mad dash to the end of the seemingly endless hallway. The only reason we were ever able to escape the Hounds was that these creatures are mainly ambush predators, able to reach terrifying speeds, but only in very short bursts. Eventually, no matter how close they got, they would run out of energy and slow back down to a crawl. If it wasn't bad enough being chased by the entities, there was also clutter blocking our way in some sections, things that seemed consistent with what might be in a real abandoned hospital. Mostly it was doctors' bags, wheelchairs, and rolling hospital beds. Although the hallway looked straight when we first entered it, we soon found that was some kind of optical illusion. Somehow the hallway was full of winding turns, some so gradual we almost didn't notice it, and others so sharp and sudden that once or twice I ran straight into a wall. Some of the turns were preceded by false exits, more doors that led nowhere but were marked with exit signs. Most of the time these doors were locked, but a few opened into pitch-black darkness. Part of me still hoped, after I had long ago reached the point of exhaustion, that the darkness would lead into another level of the back rooms. At one false exit, I opened the door and almost stepped through, until Diane pulled me back. "That's not the exit, DrBob," she said. "We're all tired, but you can't let this place trick you." She was right, of course. Even though I knew the dark room wouldn't lead me anywhere, except maybe to an untimely end, I still lingered before rejoining my two researchers. Such was the intoxicating siren song of this terrible place. In the darkness beyond the threshold, I could just make out a glowing pair of eyes and a wide, glowing mouth. It was the same face I'd seen in the darkness on the other levels of the back rooms. The face, and whatever it was attached to, started to move closer. For some reason, I was frozen to the spot. Maybe it was out of exhaustion, or maybe it was out of pure fear. The only reason I was able to snap out of it was that researcher Ben came back and slammed the door closed again. There was no time to stand around and wonder just what that sinister glowing face was attached to, or what exactly would have happened to me if it got closer. While the red level is impossible to form a long-term settlement in, and many only know it as the run-for-your-life level, that doesn't mean this nightmarish hallway full of monsters was totally without respite. We found more almond water scattered around among the debris. It did a lot to help us regain energy we'd lost in the time we'd been running, even though personally I'd never much enjoyed the taste of almonds. How long had it been since we'd reached this place? Even though I knew on some level it would be in vain, I checked my watch. Nothing. It must have been hours at this point. I felt the urge to look back, but we were still being stalked by shambling hounds and face stealers, so it wouldn't have been a good idea. If I had looked back, there would be no way of telling how far we'd come. The hallway, which, despite all the turns we knew we'd taken, still looked like a straight line from either direction, and it stretched off into the dark red haze, like the top of a building vanishing into thick fog. Eventually, we couldn't run anymore, but we couldn't stop either. We knew that if we slowed our pace any further, we'd be dead. The guttural howls of the hounds and the babbling of the skin stealers echoed all around us. Clumps followed us along the ceiling, their dozens of arms reaching towards us, their terrible stench clustering in the backs of our throats. "I can't go on," panted researcher Ben. He was doubled over, hands on his knees. "I'll die from exhaustion before we reach the end." "Snap out of it, man. You're better than this," I said, pulling him up by his shirt collar. "We're gonna make it to the end, even if Diane and I have to carry you." As if responding to our thoughts, a door opened. Another exit, we thought, meant to trick us. But instead of a completely black void beyond, this room seemed to lead to another level of the back rooms. This time, though, it looked almost like it was outside. I couldn't believe it. None of us could. We saw 4 dirt paths lined with trees. The trees were tall enough that we couldn't see the sky, but still, the fact that there were trees filled us with relief. Of course, after what we'd heard happened to people who touched the plants in the green sector of Level 1, we were still wary and very careful of where we stepped. And of course, we didn't split up. We'd learned that lesson the hard way. Above us was a thick, gray fog. The air was silent, save for the soft rustling of trees in the wind. It was eerie, to say the least, but at least we felt safe enough to slow down and regain our energy. "I found a tape recorder back in the red hallway," Diane said to me, pulling the device out of her pocket. We stood around her, and she pressed play. The tape began with static and the sound of footsteps. Then we heard a man's voice begin to speak.
"I did what you ordered,"
he said.
"I've got everything about Jerry's followers, along with their secrets. I actually almost got caught when doing so."
"Who's Jerry?" Ben wondered out loud. Diane shushed him, and the tape kept going.
"I think I can make it in about 4 to 5 hours,"
said the voice.
"Wait, that wall definitely was not there. It seems as if I've reached a dead end."
We heard the sound of the man on the tape slapping his open palms against the wall.
"This is very different from the other levels,"
he said, and we could all hear the worry in his voice. Then we all heard the same blaring siren that had announced our arrival in the red level. The man on the tape got more distressed. We could hear the sound of his clothes rubbing together as he ran, and his heavy, panicked breathing. "I really need some help. There are hundreds of entities behind me. I'm running through the corridor, but I don't know how long this goes." He dropped the recorder at that point, and the rest of the tape was just the sound of hounds, skin stealers, and other entities we couldn't even begin to guess at, mixed with the distant screams of the man on the tape. The three of us sat in silence after that. What we'd heard had disturbed us, but this tape was an important clue in our investigation of the back rooms. Though we'd seen signs of human occupation, namely a group called the Major Explorers Group, we hadn't actually met any of them face to face. This seemed like the first hard evidence we'd found that there were more people down here, whose mission was the same as ours, and who, most importantly, weren't all dead. After all, the man on the tape had been talking to someone, and most curious of all were the references to someone or something called Jerry, who seemed to be the leader of some other kind of faction. After drinking some more of our almond water stash, we were ready to keep walking. The fog never cleared, and the trees around us never thinned out. Through the branches, sometimes we thought we could see buildings, but they were hazy and off in the distance. The eeriest thing about the place was still the sound, or lack thereof. There didn't seem to be any birds or insects like there would be in a normal forest. The only noise was the trees rustling. At first, this sounded like simply the wind blowing through the trees, but then it became clear that some of these sounds were more purposeful. Diane stopped walking and pointed into the forest. "We're not alone in here," she said in a voice that was just above a whisper. Ben and I followed the direction she was pointing in. There was a shape moving in the trees, a crouched figure that looked like it was carved from wood and vines. It was on all fours. Then it raised up a hand towards us and made a beckoning motion. Beyond it, we could see the eyes of many more, clearly waiting to see if we'd take the bait. We slowly turned back around and went the way we came. The forest creatures didn't like this at all. Something seemed to keep them from ever breaching the tree line, but we could hear them shadowing us the whole way back. The rustling of leaves and pounding of footsteps through the undergrowth let us know we were being followed, even if the fog made it hard to see exactly how many forest creatures there were. Finally, we returned to the door we'd come in through. Before we opened it, we could see a line of red light at the bottom. Ben, Diane, and I all exchanged worried looks. None of us wanted to open that door again, but we didn't want to stay in this forest either. That was what most of our journeys through the back rooms had felt like. It was an endless loop of going out of the frying pan and into the fire. On the count of 3, we pushed the door open. Immediately, the entities realized we'd come back. It wasn't just the Hounds, the Clumps, or the Skin Stealers either. This time we noticed a new kind of entity. Blocky, yellow-skinned humanoids with simplistic, smiling faces and red balloons in their hands. Despite their almost silly appearance, just the sight of them struck a deep sense of dread into me. They were shambling after us, unsteady on their feet, like they were heading home after a late night of partying. The red light cast eerie shadows on their oddly blocky faces. We would later come to know that these things are the Partygoers, odd beings with mouths on their palms who, like zombies and so many other creatures in folklore, can turn humans into more of them with a bite. I still shudder to imagine what horrible process has to happen to turn a human into something like that. After turning a corner, Diane was tripped by a clump that had been hiding in the darkness on the floor. It got 5 of its hands around her, and it took both Ben and I using all of our strength to wrestle her free from the creature's grip. The other entities chasing us closed the distance in the time it took to free her. The only reason that we were able to get away was that the clump, which had no eyes, reached out and grabbed all 4 legs of one of the Hounds, causing it to fall to the ground. The result was kind of like a pileup on the interstate, which would have been funny if it had happened in any other place. Here, the ominous red lighting gave the whole situation a sense of brutal violence, even though it was impossible to say if there was any actual bloodshed. I don't know how we managed to do it, but all 3 of us made it to the end of the hallway alive. How did we know that the exit we found was the real one, and not one of the many false ones we'd almost stumbled into? Simply because after a while, we noticed that the hallway hadn't turned in a while, and there were no more paths for us to take other than the door in front of us. Not even stopping to think, I threw the door open, and we all piled through. The red light was gone. We had no idea where we were, but there wasn't anything chasing us anymore. I felt a vibration coming from my wrist and realized that somehow my watch had turned back on. Diane and Ben checked their instruments. To our surprise and delight, all the equipment we'd brought with us to record our findings were back online. "We might be able to contact the Foundation," Diane said, clearly allowing herself to feel more hope than any of us had felt for a long time. "Maybe we can even get in contact with the Major Explorers Group," said Ben. It wasn't a bad idea. If it was at all possible to report back in and let the rest of the Foundation know that we were still alive, we had to do it. With any luck, someone would be able to extract us, as long as we could live long enough to make contact. If you want to support me and my team on our journey through this nightmarish place, perhaps you can study my files on other terrifying anomalous locations for anything that might be of use to me. I suggest you start with most terrifying SCP locations you don't want to visit. Our lives might just depend on it.